Okay, a minute and then I'll start. This edition of the Davos Lab. We'll be recording. We'll be recording this session, and then it'll also be appear on YouTube at a later time. And we'll also have this seminar will also be broadcasted as Facebook Live. So let me begin by introducing Davos Labs. Davos Labs is a series of dialogues hosted by global shapers from around the world to mobilize relevant stakeholders to shape the recovery and development plan for the next decade. Key findings from these labs will be presented in the World Economic Forum's annual meeting in 2021, which is a great opportunity to shape the global discourse. In today's edition, we'll focus our discussion on inclusive jobs. We'll try to synthesize what are the barriers for people to enter and thrive in today's labor market. We will explore the challenges in South Asia and also see what solutions are there to make the labor market more inclusive so that it benefits everyone. We'll explore what has worked and what can be scaled or what needs to be scaled. So you might be thinking, what's the connection between Davos Labs, Global Shapers, and the World Economic Forum? So Global Shapers is an community. Global Shapers community is an initiative of the World Economic Forum and is a global network of youth leaders that work to bring positive change in their communities. Global Shapers has hubs in many cities around the world, and 4 hubs are co-organizing this edition of the Davos Labs, and they are the Jaipur hub from India, the Kandy hub from Sri Lanka, Kathmandu hub from Nepal, and Rawalpindi hub from Pakistan. In today, we have 4 amazing panelists from India, Nepal, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka, and all of them are pioneers in their own rights in the field of inclusive jobs. Before I introduce them, let me lay out the session. We will broadly have 3 sections in the panel discussion. First, I'll introduce the panelists one by one and give them each about 3 minutes to reflect on the topic of inclusive jobs. In the second section, we will be asking questions we collect from the floor and questions we have received previously as well. So all the audience members, please type in your questions in the chat box or the Q&A section below. In the concluding section, each of the panelists would have about a minute to say the one message they want to convene to the whole world. If they wanted all the world leaders, the business leaders to listen to one message, what would that be? So we will focus on that on the final section. So now let me start with the first section, and let me start by introducing myself. So I'm Pankaj Parajuli, and I am a Global Shapers from Kathmandu Hub. My journey on the inclusive job started in 2013 when, after graduating as a civil engineer, I decided to co-found an organization called ISAP, which looked to economically empower resource-poor people through entrepreneurship and skills development. After that, I co-founded 2 social enterprises, one of which worked with the dairy farmers to export a form of traditional Nepalese cheese, like hard cheese, to the Western market as chew for dogs. I currently work in the area of technical vocational education training with one of Nepal's major bilateral development partner. Let me introduce our first panelist, Ms. Alina Tanvir. Alina worked as an HR practitioner for over a decade in Pakistan with various large companies, including the British Council, Ufone, British American Tobacco Company, focusing on recruitment to skills development to employee engagement. She's now working as global learning and development partner in Telenor, which is the second largest cellular company in Pakistan, and her focus has been on inclusion and diversity. So Alina, when we talk about social inclusion, it is easier to think about exclusion. So how would you categorize or describe the group of people who are excluded or who face the highest barrier to enter the labor market in your experience? What exactly are those barriers? Over to you. You have about 3 minutes.
you, Pankaj. I think, hello everyone. It is a pleasure being here, talking about a topic that is in dire need of action, and moreover, something that is very, very close to my heart. And very rightly said, when we talk about inclusion, it is important that everyone needs to be included. But it is also important that we start with paying attention to the ones who have been previously or still are being marginalized, the ones who face the biggest barriers to entry, and the ones who haven't had their rights looked after or taken care of. Predominantly and in context to Pakistan, there are many such groups. I would want to focus on three main ones. First, being women. Um, Worldwide, there is a gap in terms of their inclusion in the workforce and the labor market. Bringing in context to Pakistan, women make up 49% of the population, yet they make 24% of the labor force, and this is the lowest participatory rate in the world. And within that 24% also there are issues of being paid less, of having more barriers and discriminations on the way. The second group that are really are excluded in terms of the labor force are people who are differently abled. There are very less statistics available in terms of the number, because most of them are not even recorded specifically in Pakistan. But it is very safe to say that they make very minimal representation in the labor force. The third group who are emerging to be in dire need of focus are people who make just 1% of at least the Pakistani population, which are the transgender community. But in regards to the level or the amount of barriers they face, they are innumerable. So it's very, very important to maybe categorize or prioritize the people who we really need to focus in on when we talk about inclusion. Coming to the barriers itself, there are innumerable. For women, gender roles are very, very strong, not only I think in Pakistan, but in entire South Asia. And these gender roles do inhibit females from entering the workforce. Added on to that, there is a lack of access to education, to health services, unsafe public places, transport. There are lack of policies around, childcare, on basic maternal rights. There are inflexible work environments, and basically there's no regulation, even when we talk about the informal market, because in countries in South Asia, there is the informal market or the micro economy is very, very strong. And there are really no regulations around that. So it makes it really hard for females to enter and then stay in the workforce. Moving on to differently able people, I think the biggest barrier is the lack of infrastructures and facilities to support them. That really starts from when they have to be educated to their skill development, and then when they are in or at work. And similarly for transgenders, again, I think the lack of access to education, skill development means that we are setting them up for failure. And these are just some of the barriers that I am talking about. And I'm hoping that during this discourse, we can come up and identify more barriers and also solutions to help remove them.
Thank you so much. I think that was very well structured and some very interesting points indeed. Let me move on to our second speaker, Mr. Nainish Taiku. I would describe Nainish uh, as a technical vocational education training specialist. He has worked extensively on placement-linked skills training programs for people below the poverty line, as well as youths and women. And he has been involved closely with public-private partnerships and India's flagship initiatives. Nanish, the same question to you. Who would you say have been excluded from benefiting from the thriving Indian labor market, and what has made them excluded?
Thanks, Pankaj. Very happy to be here among all of you and share and learn from you about these aspects. So quickly, Pankaj, I think Alina has summarized this very well. I think women, people with uh, with differently abled people in India uh, are primary uh, are among the primary people who've been excluded. But I'll also try and focus a bit on other inequities. I think if you look at India, a large part of uh, you know, the economic jobs are in southern India or in western India, which is really seeing a lot of economic activity. And uh, the central plains in India, states like UP, Bihar, or just if you look at the border areas, the Himalayan plains again, people who've been in far-flung areas, remote rural geographies, conflict-prone areas, Naxal affected areas, that's where jobs have not, economic development has not happened. So uh, I think there has been an inequity in terms of how Indian economic story has unfolded, whereas some states have actually grown at a much higher scale. The amount of jobs and the industrialization has been one. So those are some additional inequities that have really created a lot of unrest and attracted policy attention in terms of policymakers trying to address typical skilling challenges, whether it's J&K, whether it's Northeast, whether it's Naxal affected areas. Number one. Number two, again, if you look at young people in tier 2 and tier 3 cities per se, they've faced a lot of challenge with respect to career guidance and counseling per se. So even young people per se in India are not aware about the economic the new age jobs and the opportunities which are coming in. So uh, mm, uh, I see this happening, across tier 2, tier 3 cities across India, and uh, them, not being able to be either take an entrepreneurial journey or get into labor market. Barriers, I think Alina has summarized them well. Not much to add, but I'll say, I think with respect to women, my learning has been that urban transport and transport is one major barrier. Second, I think in the unorganized sector, maternity entitlements, uh, the, or probably uh, programs, policies that help women to uh, come back to workforce and be nourished well, is a major sector, given the fact that in India 90% of workforce is in unorganized sector, and we don't have maternity entitlements, creches, and even economic entitlements that help you to take paid care leave, like men have in the organized sector, or women have in the organized sector. So that's also one major barrier I feel, that's preventing women to be part of the training program. Stereotypes, I think Alina has spoken about. uh, uh, I also feel that as a country we aren't yet ready in getting people with differently abled abilities into the workforce. We haven't really curated enough training programs for them. Even our training infrastructure, our trainers, our policies do not talk about inclusion of people with different abilities, and do not create pathways in training as well as in jobs for them to be equal, productive members in the society. Yeah, so I'll stop there, Pankaj. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think that was a good addition. Uh, the topics you brought up were like remote areas, geographical disparities with remote areas in tier 2 cities, and urban mobility was a very interesting point that I found. Uh, Let me move on to our third speaker, Mr. Ruanta Gatugaha. Ruanta career has crisscrossed between the corporate sector and the public sector, the public sector, and or the development sector. In the corporate sector, he has led initiatives on employee skill development, diversity and disability and inclusion, as well as women's empowerment with some of Sri Lanka's largest companies. At the moment, he's working to improve the employer education linkages in Sri Lanka's public skills training system. So, Ruanta, the similar question to you, like how similar or different is the category of the excluded people in Sri Lanka And are the barriers similar, or what additions would you want to say? And if there are not that many additional items, then you can also focus on what are the initiatives that have worked to reduce the barriers to social inclusion. Over to you. Ruanta, I think you're on mute.
Thank you, Pankaj. Hope you can hear me.
Yeah, now yes.
All right. So as you said before, all the other panelists have covered most of the groups which are disadvantaged in Sri Lanka as well. But I'll just give a small context of Sri Lanka, as well as some of the barriers that they have not mentioned, which are very prevalent in Sri Lanka. So again, the largest component, largest group I can point out would be young women, especially because we have around 8.6 million economically active population, and out of which 70% accounts for male, and females only account for 30%. I know this is a bit better than what Pakistan numbers the previous panelists explored about, but still it's a very low number. Apart from young women, we also have various persons with disabilities also as a large group that is excluded from employment opportunities. If I quickly move on to the barriers, apart from the gender roles, the perception about traditional and non-traditional jobs also affect the employability and employee willingness of certain groups, especially traditional jobs, or if I may term it, comfortable jobs, especially government jobs where you get a pension, high job security, but with very less career advancement opportunities. People much prefer those versus skilled, technical, and labor-intense jobs. So hence there is a very small number of those comfortable jobs, whereas there is a big component of skilled jobs which requires employment, where people are not really going for employment opportunities. Also, sectors such as tourism sector and the construction sector are not considered as a preferred job sector for most of these groups. This is basically about because of the society considers them not suitable for various groups, especially young women and persons with disabilities. Also, the second point would be the skills gap, which would be the other barrier. This is what the employers look for as a skill and what the new recruits offer as a skill for employment. Hence, there is a gap between what they offer and what the requirement is. Many organizations must invest a monetary and effort to train and onboard new recruits, which is a major challenge in finding right talent who is ready for the job. Technical skills, language skills, especially English, and various soft skills play a major role when it comes to employer preference for new recruits. And finally, employer readiness, the willingness to accommodate disadvantaged groups, especially persons with disabilities, women in non-traditional job roles, is a very less thing within organizations. Most organizations are not geared with infrastructure, accessibility, and relevant policies to accommodate these groups. In summary, these can be categorized as the groups and major barriers currently Sri Lankans are facing, although there are various other groups which are excluded from employment opportunities. These are the major groups that has a big number in representation in the population. Pankaj?
Sorry. Thank you so much, Ruanta. I think stigmatization of certain occupations that excludes them. I think that was a very good point, and the skills gap on what the education sector offers and what the industry needs, and the employer readiness to be inclusive. I think those were some really good points. Now let me quickly move on to Subhas Subedi. Subhas Subedi is he works to he works to empower economically and socially disadvantaged youths through technical education and vocational training. He's led several teams that has provided technical assistance to the government of Nepal to improve the employability of over 100,000 youths through access to quality skills development and training courses and programs. He is the team leader of an initiative that has introduced the dual vet apprenticeship program in Nepal, which allows youth from resource poor households to earn as they gain an educational certificate. So, Subhasi, building on from the issues raised by the other panelists on who are excluded and why, what has your experience been in Nepal? And if you could complement that by also answering what initiatives have you seen that has worked to reduce these barriers to social inclusion and what can be scaled up? Over to you.
Thank you, Pankajji, and I'm also very happy to be in this discussion. And the topic of youth and employment, it is also closer to my heart. So starting from the point Ruhanta made, I start because the interaction between job seeker and the employer is based on the competencies. The employer would look for the competencies that the enterprise or the employer requires. And but when we see from the root, there are basically four dimensions in Nepali context about the exclusion, because the competency building is dependent upon four dimensions. One is social dimension, caste, ethnicity, and the social capital one has, and other people who may not have the social capital, enough strong social capital, they have problem in developing such competencies. Second is gender dimension. Women and men in our society, men get more opportunities from their childhood, and the opportunity for skills development, competency development is much easier to the men as compared to the women and third gender. Another dimension is economic dimension. It is more about affordability. Can I spend, can I invest a lot of money to develop my competencies from my economic background or not? So this is very important from competency development point of view. And the final one is geographical dimension, urban, semi-urban, rural and remote areas, as Nainis also indicated. So people from rural and remote areas, they have very little opportunity to develop competencies. So the exclusion starts from those socio-economic context. So if we cannot deal with those barriers, those causes of the exclusion, then the result, as a result, employment and entry into modern labor market is very difficult. So coming to the point, what are the concrete barriers for such exclusion? One is the access to information. Some people get relevant and timely information about the opportunities, then they can grasp it. Others, they do not have such access for the information. And in my experience, information alone is not enough, because many people, as previous panelists indicated, some people have very strong confidence, and they have exposure, and they know about the career path, they have a strong social capital, and they have someone who can guide. As Nainis mentioned, without career guidance, without the future prospect of their career, people do not easily take the opportunity. So giving advice and empowering them from the beginning should be one of the key ingredients of competency development. Second one is those who cannot afford financially, they should be supported by government fund, or maybe from the development partners fund, or maybe from the employers themselves. So supporting from economic aspect is very important to remove the barriers that is excluding certain group of people. And another one is enabling environment. Even if I'm ready to join the labor market, is the working condition is comfortable, safe, and welcoming to me as a new employee in that company. Women, they face a lot of problem in Nepali context also, as a mechanic, let's say, as a operators of heavy equipments, as a somebody working in hospitality sector. So these are the environmental aspect, working culture, related to working culture and so on. And the most important one is psychological barrier. Many people do not think that it is for them. So building such confidence, it requires a lot of counseling, a lot of motivation, and a lot of exposure in terms of career guidance and psychological support. So these are the key barriers, and we have to act on those barriers. Then only we can expect the inclusive workforce, and we can enhance the inclusion of people who need such support. I think it is it at the moment, Pankaj.
Thank you so much, Percy. I think that was a lot of information. I really liked how you classified the barriers, in terms of social capital, in terms of the gender dimension, in terms of the economic dimension, and the geographic dimension. And you did mention about the career guidance as a tool. So I'll swing back to maybe Nanish ji. What are the other tools that you've seen that can empower or that can build the competence of the excluded? So what has something else worked?
So Pankaj, I think we need to take a complete life cycle view of a young person or anyone's, to be able to uh, plan their journey. So it starts from guidance and counseling at school level. It moves to relevant skilling when you are, say, at a high school level from class 10th to 12th, where you make an important economic decision for your career. uh, that's where most people opt for the streams that they work in. uh, Relevant skilling, again, helps into choosing the career that you want to get into. Um uh, uh, Many people would actually the shift from just seeking jobs to creation of jobs also happens at that point of time. uh, and and also uh, uh, looking at areas that uh, you would want to work on in terms of your own skilling, or job requirements. uh, uh, is also is also that young people need to learn what works well. uh, I think understanding that South Asia is diverse, and then there are inequities that you need to factor in training programs, one, and therefore having different training programs for say a class 5 fifth pass to say someone who's like a graduate. um, Looking at modular, employable, um, industry driven skills, uh, and then training people for exactly like what Ruwanta said, what companies are looking at, so that the cost of retraining and the cost of induction for companies comes down, and young people also have a flavor and flair for what they're getting into. And I've seen this, that most of the skill programs in India actually just try to fulfill the demand, and uh, that's how retention was never prioritized. And the whole approach in India that we took was retention focused placement linked skills training. Uh, uh, that works, making industry and private sector a part of the skilling paradigm in India, which provides for learn and earn and flexible systems to get into systems of learning and earning, uh, especially in today's world, helps. I think digital training and COVID has taught us this, that the gig economy is going to increase, and our young people need to have those basic skills of using technology to be able to just present themselves, whether it's cloud kitchen today, we are in another pandemic delivery, using social media to be able to reach out to a bigger audience, to be able to monetize whatever they can wherever, because technology has been a great leveler. So digital, focusing on digital training and barriers around digital divide, overcoming that works. And finally, I feel uh, uh, in I think a lot of attitudinal and competency building, because uh, you are going to work in very volatile, unpredictable environments. You are going to have complexity of automation, job loss. So uh, uh, focusing on the softer elements of a person's attitude, in being prepared to meet shocks, job losses, being able to work along with people, and focusing on that element is also very important. So as Subhash said, psychosocial element or psychosocial training also should be a very important part of any skill or job training program that can help young people navigate these times as well.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing some really good, like, learning and earning, industry linked jobs, like placement based jobs, where it's not only the public sector or the school system that's just producing the manpower, but an active involvement of the private sector. Um, Let me swing back to Alina ji, and Subhash ji talked about creating the enabling environment in the private companies, right? So how has your company, or what have you seen that about creating that right enabling environment?
I think it is very, very essential. I think whatever that was said earlier completely resonated to me. It's very, very important at every level, be it the government, be it a private organization, be it everyone, to really work on what they have and try to reduce the gap, um, and try to increase inclusion. I think I would want to refer back to some of the initiatives that I have seen that work to reduce the barrier, and I would want to talk about them. Primarily referring back to my organization, which is Telenor. I think the first and most important is the belief that diversity is profitable and the right thing to do. And I mean profit, I do not mean in monetary terms alone, right? It's about the belief that diverse people bring the right experience and it is the right thing to do. And with that intent, then has to come clear actions on what you need to achieve. Primarily in the labor force today, we do see that there is a large amount of people who do not have access. So in terms of a private organization, I think the first step is to, after the intent is set, to really put a target to what you want your organization to look like. How many females do you want represented in the organization? How do you want to facilitate people who are differently abled? And when you have a target, you then work around, you review policies, you enable the culture, and it really sets off a path on how you would want to enable these people to make a place in the workforce. Just referring to the organization that I'm working on, it was very clear that if we had to get females in the workforce, we do understand that probably the skill level would not be if we have to compete in a fair environment compared to males, because it was beautifully said that some traditional roles are still with males. For example, sales roles. Rawanta mentioned this too. Females are not comfortable going into sales roles because they predominantly have been male-driven roles. So it is up to the organization now to take in females, train them, and make them able to compete with the already very strong male-dominant environment. Alongside that, providing the right care in terms of maternity leave. Pakistan itself has a 3-month paid maternity as a mandate, but Telenor goes with a 6-month paid maternity leave. We have a daycare set up in our facility. We have a nanny allowance for those who want to avail that. We provide pick and drop to our females. We stressed upon this, that the metro system is not safe for females to travel on, and that is a big detriment when deciding that you have to go for a job. So providing pick and drop for your females. Overall, another very important thing is being flexible. And when I talk about flexible work models, I think COVID did teach us a lot in that regard, because the traditional structures of working a 9-to-5 job or working in a physical setting has been challenged. Telenor was good enough to have this flexibility model beforehand, where females and males had the choice to choose their own hours, and even if they wanted to work remotely. And one important factor I think that even private organizations need to be wary of is the pay gap. This is a problem that is evident in the world. And if you want to work towards ensuring that females stay in the workforce, we need to have a consistent eye on how we are paying them and that it matches the skills that they have. Another important point is that since private companies and organizations usually do have a very strong structure, they have a lot of resources. And a strong advice from my end would be to invest in training programs. Telenor Pakistan invests in two training programs. One is for females who have to re-enter back into the workforce. So any females who want to re-enter back, of course, will have to face a very challenging times. So Telenor Pakistan takes on females for those roles. We train them. If they are entered, if they get a job back in Telenor, that's good enough. If not, we do try to place them somewhere else in the organization. It's just about building females who have left their jobs earlier due to taking care of the children or any other reason, now have an easier access back into work. Another training program that we run is for people with disabilities. It's a program called Open Mind, where we hire for different roles only people who are differently able. And coming back to the conversation, that sometimes their skills and competencies not match to what we require, but then the onus comes onto the organization. So what we do is that before the person is placed on the job, they undergo a 3-month training program where they are taught any skill that would be required for their particular role. And I think that's very, very important to notice that to bring the ground to a level, we have to invest maybe more in people who did not have that opportunity before. So in terms of just looking at that, and another very important is just providing that culture where they're accepted. Social stigma, unconscious biases, all of those things that have a large impact on a person's psychological health are very, very evident in our society. And we cannot operate without understanding them, being aware of them and acting upon them, because eventually the task is not just to get people in. It's about ensuring that they have the skills to work, to make a career out of it, to develop a livelihood. And in regard to just organizations and private sector, I think it's very, very important to also see how MNCs can leverage their strengths in maybe looking at groups or labor forces that are not directly linked to them. It was very interestingly said by Nanesh that geographical disparity is something that's evident in India. It's also evident in Pakistan also, where semi-urban places, universities, tier 2, tier 3 universities are not looked at. Telenor made a very clear call that while we're having career drives in the top tier 1 universities, we will go to tier 2 and tier 3 universities and give them the skills, skills on how to make your CV, on interviewing skills, just trying to build up capacity over there and not ignoring them while we are looking at our talent landscape. And just lastly, bringing on to the focus on how you can leverage strengths. I just want to share an example of what Telenor Pakistan is doing for our agriculture. So South Asia, agriculture is a very, very important or majority of what constitutes of the labor force. And while we cannot offer them jobs directly, what we have started doing is we have an entire agriculture vertical where through our internet services and through our mobile services, we are providing farmers with information about seeds, about weather, about what are the right rates, when they should harvest their crop. And the idea behind this is that how can you enable a labor force in your country that is not linked to what your job is, but just how can you make their livelihood better? So I think that's something to think about. And if every organization truly delves into their strengths and tries to provide towards labor organizations, I think we will work towards closing the gap a little more.
Thank you so much. We had a question from the floor, and it was about automation. And automation is considered as the next big challenge for jobs, and it could be the next big cause for major job loss, right? And maybe I'll just start with Subhasji. What has your experience been in that regard in South Asia, and also in terms of like the effect of automation in skilling, right? Like when the technology advances so much, how do you keep the skilling relevant? So two questions for you, Subhasji.
Yeah, thank you, Pankaj. Automation is, it is the fact, and it is coming um, stronger and stronger, every year. We see the automation in banking sector. It is reducing jobs for entry level jobs, for example, tailor jobs, and same is the story for travel and tourism industry, air ticketing, for example, booking, hotel booking, room booking, for example. So this is affecting the low skilled people who have they are the vulnerable in the automation. I see there will be need of high skilled people, but it will reduce jobs for the basic level positions, and it also have some opportunities because of sophisticated IT tools and IT platforms and automation. Many young software engineer from Nepal, they are serving their client in Europe and other countries. So this is also opportunity side. So in regard to Nepali job market, automation is not that strong. It is discussed in Western context. It is still, it is still affordable. It is still, we still have some time to prepare ourselves. But the concept of lifelong learning and, continuous development is very important, because there will be no any durable skill. I also observed, looked at the chat box. So there, I think there is no durable skill. So you should reskill yourself. You should upskill yourself as per the technology advances. So automation is coming, and we have to be prepared. And the most vulnerable group from automation would be those who are from disadvantaged group, who have very, who are least educated, and who do not have exposure to the technology. So it is very important topic to be discussed. I think in few years it will be a dominating factor in labor market. At least it is not that much intensive now. So this is my experience in this regard. And I would like to also add one point in regard to removing the barrier. Skill and employment, it is a big ecosystem. If we cannot convince the employers or their association, then the graduates from certain, for example, women graduates in mechanical trade, if they are not hired by the employers, and there is no meaning. Even if the women, the girls, they have confidence, they have skills, they have competencies, it doesn't work. So let me share my one experience. uh, 2 years back, I met one entrepreneur in Nepal who was running metal workshop, mechanical workshop, and all of his employees were men, and only one woman was his wife in the enterprise as a cashier. Then when we approached in collaborating in dual vet model, and he was saying that I do not hire any women, because if I hire women, then the whole work environment is not suitable for the women, and if one woman is in my workforce, then there will be some disturbance in workforce. So that was his mentality. But after a long conversation, he was convinced at least to hire two women. And now he is the one who looks for women apprentice only, because he saw they are committed, they are hardworking, they are punctual. The retention rate of women is very, very good. So this is how we have to see as an ecosystem in skill and employment. So now this entrepreneur is supporting us to replicate this model. So just giving you one example, we have to find pioneer enterprises, pioneer women apprentice or trainees, so that they are the role model for others. They do not easily trust women or those people from disadvantaged group. They do not easily believe what we say, but they believe what similar group graduates from similar group, if they share their success stories, then they easily believe this. So we think we should think from that perspective too. Thank you, Pankaj.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Thank you so much, Subhashi. I think that was very enlightening on how you, with a concrete example, how convincing one person and then using that example to scale up access or recruitment to the for women in small and medium enterprises works, right? So let me swing back to Ruanta with the last question that because I'm looking at the time as well, and so as you brought this topic of like the need for upskilling and reskilling, right? So what are the roles private companies need to play to upskill and reskill their workforce, and how do companies benefit, and what kind of incentives can the government provide, or what is the incentive that can the is there for the private sector as well? Rwanda.
Thank you, Pankaj. So basically talking about incentive schemes in Sri Lanka, basically Sri Lanka has free education system and health care system, which helped a lot of children and ensured them going to school and coming out of school with some level of education and literacy. So to begin with, certain other incentives, like, in the vocational training sector, there are certain incentives, certain schemes where they provide free courses on specific technical vocations, as well as providing certain accommodation facilities, travel allowances, and various other allowances, so that it would encourage young people in various sectors to join these programs. When it comes to private sector initiatives, what I can say is upskilling and reskilling is a major investment a private company can do, which plays a major part as employers retention, as well as job satisfaction as well. Basically, most of these big companies play a role as a trendsetter in Sri Lanka. Like small scale businesses benchmark certain practices out of big companies. Example, the apparel industry employs around 250,000 workforce in Sri Lanka. Major top players in the industry set the tone and standard for the other organizations to follow, which quickly is adapted and followed to be in par with the competition. This is where inclusion activities, training, and upskilling makes a difference. I think many organizations invest on employee training, as other panelists spoke about in details in Sri Lanka as well. Some organizations focus on facility improvements for employees, employee engagement activities, empowerment and CSR activities, and various exposure opportunities where employees can develop their skills, experience, and exposure, as well as increase desirable working condition. As a result, employee retention and efficiency is increased, and job satisfaction as well, knowing that the career progression and self-development is part of the employment package. If I may say about the government benefit, how the government will benefit is where the government has entered into partnerships with certain private sector organizations to incorporate some of these trainings which they do in-house into the vocational training sector. So basically that would help develop and update curriculums which are outdated to match the modern employer requirement. So that would shorten the gap of skills gap. this would be a win-win situation, as curriculum now will be incorporated with what the private sector skill requirement is, and private sector would benefit with shorter downtime when a new recruit is recruited and the time it takes to make them job ready. Cutting down on time and effort, it would also be a linkage between the academic institutions and the private sector, where job sourcing would be very efficient. Also, it would create less time spent for graduates looking for jobs, and as well companies, especially HR teams, looking for the right candidate to be hired. So I think these are the factors that I can come into take into consideration. Your question, Pankaj. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ruanta. It's like really liked how you mentioned it's like you have to motivate the top companies because they are the ones with the resources, and once they change, we can also have that thing translates down into the smaller companies, and you change the whole industry as a whole. I think there was a really interesting point there, and the collaboration between industries and the vocational education sector for curriculums and skills upgrading. I think that was really good, really great points. I think because we have around 10 minutes left for the session, so we've come to the final section, and here I think I would want our audience to type in 1 or 2 sentences in the chat box to say like what you've learned today. So this would help, and what you want the whole world to know, like what you've learned today that you want the whole world to know, or the message that you want to take home from today's panel discussion. Right, and then that will help sharpen the message to provide the insights for us, to provide that insight to the World Economic Forum as well. So I'll give 30 seconds for the people, or 1 minute for all the audience members to just type in whatever you've learned today, or one message that you want to take away. Thirty more seconds. Looking forward to this. And in the meantime, after we've received a few messages, we'll ask the same question to our panelists as well. If there's one takeaway message that you want the whole world to know, like in terms of who's excluded, or how can you remove the barrier for who's excluded. So just like one message, 30 seconds each for each panelist. I think we've received a few comments from our audience members already. So I think we'll just start the other way around. So I think first would be Subhashi from Nepal.
Takeaway message. So I think it is very important to establish strong collaboration between world of education and world of work, because work-ready, industry-ready people cannot be produced only by these schools. So that is the message I get from today's discussion.
Thank you so much. Ruanta, one quick message.
Yeah, thank you, Pankaj. Basically, what the pandemic has taught us is that one silver lining is there. People now are more digitally accessible, so the world is watching. So I think it's the best time the world leaders and business leaders of major corporates will need to adapt and demonstrate that they can ensure inclusive environment for everyone, irrespective of their background. So this would help set the tone and make them a role model for small economies like ours and businesses to follow. So I think that would be the message that I can give. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Nanish?
So Pankaj, I feel South Asia is home to around 1.7 billion people, and our destinies today are linked. So I think governments have to be open in terms of exchange of workforce and exchange of skills programs. Getting providing international mobility will be fundamental in how young people can contribute. I also feel that South Asia has the edge of uh, of being good in traditional skills, in handicrafts, a lot of work with our hand, etc. As well as because we are home to a lot of people, so caregiving, healthcare, geriatric care, which is going to be a demand in next 20 years as we age across the world, is another area which is emerging. So I don't see I don't see any way out of investing in human capital in South Asia, whether it's companies or governments or young people like us and citizens like us. We would have to invest in in creating that basic asset base, creating that human capital for the world and for our own self.
Thank you so much. Alina?
I think my message was beautifully put by Ravanta, because I truly agree that technological and digital literacy is something that we need to pay focus on if we want to reduce the gap, which will widen in the future if we don't work on this. But just one last message to, I think, even all the participants over there, because what we have been discussing are in hands of corporations and in policymakers and the government. But at the same time, actions speak louder than words. And if every person here, every student, potential business owner, every brother, every father, every sister, anyone who is here listening can take one small step or action to remove any barrier to increase participation in a small way. And I think even that small step they take, imagine the impact that it would have if we collectively do that. And I really think that it is time for action now.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Alina. Now Avi will send us a link. It's a Davos Lab survey link. So to all the audience members. So if you could also fill it out right after the session, or even now concurrently as you listen to us, that would be great. And I think that brings us to the end of our panel discussion. And thank you everyone. Thank you, the panelists. I think it was very informative discussion today. I have a lot of takeaways to take home. I really like the approach brought by Subhashi on how to categorize the exclusion dimensions, geography, economic, social, that aspect. And then I really like Energy's how to create that enabling environment in the company. And Nanish talking about the linkages between the company and the need for investment by companies in this vocational skills, like contribute towards to making sure the trainings really works. So that was a really fruitful discussion. So at this end, I really want to thank all the audience members for all the questions. We could only take a few because of lack of time. I think we combined 2 questions from all the things that we received. So thank you thank you the audience. Thank you all who joined in today, and for those who also wrote the one sentence takeaway that you had. And then I also want to thank Avi, Gaurav, and the team from Jaipur for setting the scene and the wonderful posters which we used to advertise. Saloni, Sadiksha, and the team from Kathmandu Hub for the research and support and coordination. Munib and his team from the Rawalpindi Hub. Hasini and Shaggy and the team from the Candy Hub. All of us really got together and it was like everybody's involvement to get this panel going, and we really hope the messages that we've learned, and the what can be scaled up, who are the excluded, all these key messages we can give, provide to web, and then some of that could be shared with the policy leaders and the corporate leaders of the world. Thank you so much for all those who tuned in, and I think that's bye bye from our side.
Thank you, Pankaj.
Thanks, Pankaj. All the best.
Thank you. Take
you.
care.
Take care.